Hi there, I'm Dave Marks and welcome to episode 2 in my Rutbusters series. Today we're going to look at how you can find inspiration in music from other parts of the world. Growing up in Ireland, I thought I had quite a varied musical palette because as a young person I sort of listened to pop music as a kid, just whatever was on the charts and your, now that's what I call music, tapes, cassettes. And then I started listening to rock and metal more whenever I was heading into my teens. And then I started grabbing hold of like some soul music and some 60s and 70s kind of blues rock and psychedelia. And I thought I was being really eclectic. So to me this was like, oh, I listen to Metallica and Megadeth, but I also listen to Cream and Sly and the Family Stone and Lionel Richie. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's all kind of... Much as that is eclectic within Western rock and soul music, there was a whole world of other musics that I just hadn't, that was just like stuff from over there, stuff from the Caribbean, stuff from India, stuff from Africa, stuff from China. I had no idea about any of it. Didn't really even know that it, I mean, I knew that it existed, but I wouldn't have been able to tell one thing from another. And so whenever I went to college, I came to London, I started to meet musicians from all over the world, and you'd hear musicians from all over the world. The place I lived in was Southall. Southall is predominantly Indian and Pakistani, and so throughout the year there would be sort of parades and festivals and things like that, and it was all just pure music straight from the source, which I thought was incredible. It was just blowing my head off. I remember lying in my bed, sitting up looking out the window, I'm watching a parade come up my road with just like a load of doll drummers playing rhythms and stuff as they went up and down the street, and it was incredible. And so this started to expand my concept, and so I started to hang out with people from different parts of the world and taking different gigs, and I started doing quite a lot of stuff in Jewish music, and that would range from very, very sort of historical and culturally specific Jewish music to broader kind of Arabic music and Middle Eastern stuff. And there were certain grooves and forms and specific rhythms and things that I had to know, and they were being shouted at me. We would all wear in-ears, and you would get told down the mic. It would just, if you might have a chord chart and they'd shout Mizrahi, and you have to know what the rhythm of that on the bass is going to be, or Esta, or whatever. And initially it was horrible. I mean, it wasn't that it was horrible, I was horrible at it. I was just flying by the seat of my pants and trying to keep up with everyone else and probably being a bit crap, but I did my best. And gradually over time you get more comfortable and you get you feel like you fit a little bit more into how the music works, and sometimes there would be a number of percussionists, or there could be 4 singers coming over, or there could be a violin player, there could be these different people who are bringing a very specific flavour of that part of the world that they come from. So someone playing violin who comes from Morocco or Egypt or Israel or wherever is going to be very different from a fiddle player in Ireland. It's the same instrument, but the way they approach it is so different. So I got all this stuff and tried to soak it in, and I would ask questions and sort of sneak over and ask people to play. What did you play on that? You know, and just be curious and try and figure it out. And it's meant that later on in my career, whenever I get given things, somebody gives me a chart or sends me a song and it has a certain different flavour in it, I'm going to play with a Serbian guitar player, or I'm going to play with an African percussionist, I can kind of access that. And aside from anything else, it's really fresh. It's a completely new planet of stuff for you to work on. So I'm going to give you guys a little playing example for this week's lesson. In March of this year, I was out on tour with Don Airey. Don Airey plays keyboards in Deep Purple. If anybody doesn't know who Deep Purple are, go and check them out. They are one of the all-time iconic classic rock bands. They fused together blues and rock, as kind of most of the classic rock bands did, and they also somehow had this kind of psychedelic Middle Eastern vibe going on. So Don sent us a tune called Rapture of the Deep, and I had to figure this song out, I had to transcribe it and figure out how I was going to approach it. And one of the things I noticed in it was it's quite a go-to chord progression if you want that Middle Eastern vibe, is to take your 1 chord, in this case A major, and then go up a semitone, and back again. Or alternatively, you can do the A major and go down to G minor. And that already sets you up with a kind of flavour of a Middle Eastern thing. So it can be cool too, if you can program or loop a little chord progression, try an A major going to B flat major thing, or an A major going to G minor, or alternate between the two. Here's a little example. Simon McBride and I were jamming on the bus during the tour, and one of the things I wanted to put up on Instagram was a little unison part of us playing the theme from Rapture of the Deep, and then just going off into a little improvisation at the end of it here. So I'm going to play it through with the backing track, and you can check it out. Let's take a look at the hand position, fingering and articulation for Rapture of the Deep. So we'll start with our second finger on the 12th fret of the A string, and then we hammer on with our third finger to the 13th fret. Then I play the 11th fret of the D string with my first finger, and I slide it up one fret to the 12th. Now in both cases I pluck the first note and hammer on, and then pluck the first note and slide. Then I'm going to play the 14th and 15th frets of the D string with my third and fourth fingers. And finishing finally, the top of the run is the 12th fret of the G string. And come back down 15th and 14th frets with my fourth and third fingers. So you get this. Now, we have this nice little trill with a slide, and it's a very particular sort of articulation that makes things sound Eastern. So if you're trying to get a more authentic vibe on this kind of stuff, it could be worth taking something like that little phrase and just get used to playing it over and over so that you can drop it in wherever you need it. Maybe try it with some different fingerings. So just as an articulation, what I'm doing is first finger on the 12th fret, hammer on to the third finger on the 14th, pull off again to the 12th, and slide down one fret to the 11th. And then I play the D note on the 12th fret. So you get, and the only thing I pluck is the first note and the last one. Now be careful, it's not it's the first note is slightly longer. So you get and you can kind of play around with that phrasing a little bit to give it a different vibe. From there we do the same rhythmic idea, but we can't quite do the same fingering because it's split across two strings. So we get 11th fret of the D string with the first finger, and we do our hammer on and pull off with the second finger on the 12th fret. And then we play the 13th fret of the A string with our third finger, and finish on the 11th fret of the D string, so we finish where we started again. We play that 2 times, and then we simply, to finish off, we play the 13th fret of the A string with the third finger, up to the 11th fret on the D string with our first finger. Now there's an important little thing that happens here. Instead of me playing the same thing twice, and that would mean I would finish that on the third finger and play down to the second and first with a bit of a stretch. I can play and I substitute my fourth finger there. So third finger first, then fourth finger plays the same note and means that my hand's in position to play a kind of one finger per fret version of that. So the whole thing slowed down looks and sounds like this. That's all there is to it. That's the basic mechanics. Let's look at it down an octave next. In this I start with my second finger on the 5th fret of the E string, and then hammer on with my third finger. to the 6th fret. I then play the 4th fret of the A string with my first finger and slide it up 1 fret to the 5th fret. And then finally, I'm going to play the 7th and 8th frets of the A string with fingers 3 and 4. And I get to the top of my run with the first finger on the 5th fret of the D string. So the whole thing sounds like this. And then come back down, the 4th and 3rd fingers on the 8th and 7th frets of the A string. Now the important things here is that the first 2 notes are a hammer-on, then the next 2 are a slurred slide. So I only pick that first note and then slide it up. The rest are all plucked. Then we get this nice little, it's like a trill with a slide and another hammer-on. And I'm basically playing the first finger, trilling up to the 4th and back again. So it's a hammer-on and a pull-off. And then slide down. And then play that D note. So I pluck the first note and then the last one. And then I'm going to replicate that same phrasing idea, but this crosses across 2 different strings, so we can't quite do it with the same articulation. Here we're going to trill between the 4th and 5th frets, and then I play the 6th fret of the E string with my 4th finger, and then back up to that 4th fret. And then to finish off the whole riff, we just play first finger to 4th, same again, and then 3rd finger to 1st on the 5th and 3rd frets. So 4th fret of the A string, 6th fret of the E string, repeat, and then 5th and 3rd frets of the E string. The whole thing slowed down sounds like this. That is the main riff. For the improvisation section, I'm mainly playing over an A major chord, and then I move down to G minor and back up again to resolve. So in this particular part, I've added a slide at the start, really to try and get that sort of you hear this a lot in sort of African talking drum and in some Middle Eastern drums, where they get that quality where it sounds like the pitch changes when they play. So I like using the slide for that, and it sounds kind of groovy and funky and all those things, but it's mainly I'm trying to replicate the sound of something that you hear in Eastern music. I slide from the G on the 3rd fret of the E string up to my A, and then I play that octave on the 7th fret of the D string. And then I maybe do like a little dead note and an open string. Now when I say an open string, I'm going like, it's not really, it's usually that I'm kind of muting it, it's a little bit dead, but it just adds to the spice of the groove. And then on the G there, whenever we play the G chord, I just play the G root note on the 3rd fret of the E string, and then the D on the 5th fret of the A string. And I can alternate that rhythm around a little bit, I can play with it. So sometimes it's do, 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 ga, do, sometimes it's da, do, do, dee, do, like a really strict triplet thing. So I'm fusing together that triplety thing. It makes me instinctively think of reggae music, but it's kind of all coming from the African heritage, and that's obviously where this Middle Eastern music gets its vibe from. So some of those like reggae-ish triplets and things can really sit in the pocket for this. I withstood the urge to do any fills in it. I was thinking of playing like that kind of thing, but I've played the melody, the first part, I played it up the octave with the other instruments, I played it down the octave, and then when it came time to do that improvisation, it was so short that I thought just really nail the groove and hold it down. So that is the mechanics of playing that part. Let's dig in on the theory of what we're doing here. So the scale that we're using is called Phrygian dominant. Now Phrygian dominant combines 2 different things together. Phrygian mode and the idea of a dominant chord. So let's dig into each one of those individually. Phrygian mode, if I was to play it exactly, is the 3rd mode of the major scale, and A Phrygian would have a root, flat second, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, flat six, flat seven, an octave. Now it's a minor chord that works over, and in this case we have a major chord, so our third, instead of being minor, is now major third. So we get root, flat second, major third, and then the rest of it's the same. Perfect fourth, perfect fifth, flat six, flat seven, and our octave. The difference that major or minor third makes is pretty profound, so you can't really underestimate it, and you have to be very specific about which one you're using. Generally speaking, Phrygian sounds more Spanish. Phrygian dominant sounds more Middle Eastern. That's a kind of general rule of thumb for it. And the idea when it says dominant, it's talking about a dominant 5 chord. So in that case, you have a root, major third, perfect fifth, and flat seven. Kind of like the start of I Feel Good. That has a 9 as well, but it's the first. We know the sound of a dominant chord. It occurs in loads of music. Usually whenever we're trying to do a resolution from a 5 back to a 1, perfect cadence. That kind of thing. In this case, the dominant chord isn't trying to resolve to somewhere else. It's not a thing we're using to go somewhere. It is the tonality. It's the center. So when we come back to that A dominant sound, we've arrived home. The thing that makes this interesting is because we have an A triad and a B flat triad right next to each other. Now this is quite a strange thing. We don't get this anywhere in the normal major and minor scales where you have major triads a semitone apart. So we can do lots of stuff where we play around with semitones. So you find that kind of tonality lends itself to those little, like as I said earlier, little Arabic articulations, the use of slides and slurs and stuff. And you can do things like that if you want to put an A pedal down. And it always sounded to me growing up like the music from Indiana Jones. That's this when I heard this sound, it's what it made me think of. And it's probably not a coincidence. There's a big chunk of Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark takes place in Egypt. So they've obviously gone for a very Egyptian influenced kind of soundtrack on that. So you've got your Phrygian dominant scale, and you can view that one of two ways, and you can also view it in terms of arpeggios, of using an A major or A dominant arpeggio and a B flat major arpeggio. So you can alternate between those two to get some soloing ideas. Hopefully that should give you some inspiration to just take something like this and start messing around with it. See if you can find some nice creative ways to phrase things. See if you can find some authentic ways to play stuff. One final suggestion is that if you're jamming over something like this, and we've got a 4-bar or 2-bar vamp that you got to go around for a long time, A major and then heading down to G minor, you could substitute B flat major instead of that G minor. Basically, G minor and B flat major are the relative minor and major of each other. So they contain some similar notes. B flat has B flat, D and F, and G has G, B flat and D. Now, when you think about it in that order, it doesn't make as much sense as to say B flat major has B flat, D and F, G minor has B flat, D and G. So you can hear that those two notes are common and the other two alternate. That's B flat, that's G minor. So if I'm playing a groove over this and I've got B flat, So you can hear how that already, it doesn't sound like I'm going somewhere harmonically really different. Kind of fits into that groove, but it gives me a little variation. So using relative majors and minors can be a cool thing to put in if you've got a vamp that's going to go around for a long time. Right, that's enough of this nerdy stuff. So hopefully that'll give you some ideas and some inspiration to try playing some different music styles that you haven't really heard before. The most important thing with all of this, I would say, is don't put on like a Middle Eastern groove and then just start playing funk slap licks over the top of it. That is not helping you at all. Yes, you're bringing something new and fresh to the music, but it's not giving anything new or fresh to you because you're just using what you already have in that context. And so a lot of the time when we try to do something that's really new and really fresh, you're not going to be very good at it. It's going to be really challenging and feel a bit lumpy and you just think, oh God. But if you stick with it, those are the things that will expand your musicality outwards. If all you do is keep playing the same set of licks that you have, nothing ever changes, nothing ever grows. What you need to do is go to where they are, go to this Middle Eastern vibe and try and be as authentic as you can within that experience. Now, you might not ever have a gig where you need to play specifically Middle Eastern things, but it could literally be something in the middle of a solo or a little melody thing in a song or just a particular groove that you want to get hold of that you can integrate into something else you're doing. It all contributes to your inner musicality. Have fun with this for the week. I'll make this track available as a download. You can go to my website. I'll put the link in there and get it for free. In the meantime, if you want to leave comments, post video responses, like or subscribe, and I would love it if you want to support me on Patreon. It means I'll have more time to keep putting up top quality stuff, good education, good backing tracks, all that good stuff. So help to support other bass players around the world and good educators on YouTube when you can. If you get a benefit from them, let them know. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in a week's time.